Hi, everybody. This is Angela Catalesa. I am so excited to be here with David Pasiak today. David, before we dive in, I want to give you an opportunity for you to introduce yourself, and then I may give some thoughts also about my impressions of you from when we first met with the Empathy Flow conference a while back. And anyway, I'm going to hand it over to you. Go ahead.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Hello, everyone. Hello, fellow polymaths. So I think I'll introduce myself in a way that I would say is a little different than I normally do because I feel like I'm speaking to people that share my own kind of heart. I've considered myself a polymath really my entire life, constantly learning new things, constantly going into different types of disciplines. And in particular, for me, I start off my career actually as a religion scholar. So I was, and I kind of fell into that as a trade. So I started off. I was around 19 years old, and I started having all of these terrible panic and anxiety attacks to the point where I ended up dropping out of school and I couldn't leave my home. And at the time, I was studying engineering, and I just started having this deep kind of crisis of meaning, had all this kind of unprocessed trauma and stuff come up from a kind of a troubled relationship with an alcoholic father. And around the same time, my younger sister committed suicide, and there was just a lot of stuff going on in my life. And I stumbled into studying into meditation, and I found that meditation was the thing that really helped me to, I feel like I like deep down, I felt like I didn't want to just sort of treat symptoms. I wanted to treat the underlying issues, the underlying problems that were really going on. And I knew intuitively at a deeper level that I wasn't just that I was gonna that just taking drugs or just trying to come up with a story or something like that really wasn't going to do it for me. So I ended up going back to school. I became really passionate about these practices. I started studying religious studies. And religious studies is one of the things that it's actually probably, in terms of traditional disciplines in universities, in many ways, it's the most diverse. It's the most kind of inherently polymathic, you could say. So you study anthropology, philosophy, psychology, you study history, you have this kind of view of these different sort of like you might call them transcendent ideals or things that are sort of overarching. Then you look at these various interdisciplinary approaches. And so I started to learn all these different perspectives. I went from there to I got a master's at Arizona State University, then went to pursue PhD studies at Princeton, and I started studying comparative mysticism. And I got super into this, looking at all these different approaches to ancient mystical traditions, how they impact society, how mystical traditions were in many ways kind of the foundation of the rise of the world religions and how they became kind of separate and different from those. And I was particularly interested in these movements of awakening and transformation and how those had a broader cascading effect upon society, and was especially interested in how these practices impacted the West and kind of the cross pollination of those ideas to the East. But my first week of my PhD studies at Princeton, 9/11 happened. So Princeton's about an hour outside of New York City, and I remember it just being kind of I was going into New York and involved in the protests leading up to the invasion of Iraq. And of course, now I feel like I'm being vindicated as we're starting to see all this stuff in the news, that actually the stuff around weapons of mass destruction was all kind of manufactured and all that sort of stuff. But it was during that time of going a lot into New York City and wanting to be more out into the world, I really started to become much more aware of the transformative power of the internet and social media and early social media, and how that was going to be a radical change to the future of society as we know it. So I eventually ended up going from studying these types of movements, and after my third year at Princeton, I eventually took a leave of absence and then started getting to all sorts of other things in New York City, and eventually decided that I was not going to go back to school. So I started getting into building these big movements online. I ran social media for Volkswagen, a number of really big brands. And then in terms of like polymathic stuff, it was really interesting because I'd had all this training in how movements spread and how people think and communicate and all these different interdisciplinary approaches. All that experience just translated into landing these senior executive positions in a matter of just 1 to 2 years, which would typically take 8 to 10 years or more to land yourself in. And I just want to pause and say that for people who are interested in polymathic stuff, especially now with the rise of AI and automation, all of that, having a polymathic interdisciplinary approach is probably the absolute best training you can have for this exponential future. So anyways, I feel like I'm so grateful that I stuck with that. So I was in New York City for about 5 years. And then when the crash of 2008, 2009 happened, I was in this position where I was running social media for Volkswagen at the time, and I had this, $100 million advertising budget and all this sort of stuff. And I felt like greed and capitalistic excess had crashed the economy. And I didn't want to be in a position where I was just trying to convince people to buy more stuff. I felt like somehow I was doing a lot of really cool stuff with the social media advertising, but I'd somehow kind of gotten a little bit off course in terms of my values and vision and the impact that I wanted to have. So I eventually, I quit my job. Everyone told me I was crazy. I quit this great job. I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I traveled around Southeast Asia and India for about a year. And that's when I wrote my first book. My first book was called Red Bull to Buddha. So that was about the idea that there's traditional conceptions of community, and then innovation is inherently disruptive. So how do we find that kind of balance? And that, I'd say trying to find that balance has really been the core of my work and my mission over the last kind of 20 years, even going back to my PhD studies. So I wrote that book. I wrote another book called Disruption Revolution. And that book, I did a series of thematic interviews on innovation. The thing that's interesting about innovation, and this also relates to polymaths, is that when there's innovative things happening, a lot of times they're happening in different kind of pockets and areas around the world. And because people are doing innovative things, they're not necessarily in dialogue with each other. So they're coming up with different ideas, different thoughts, different terms. So a lot of times the same type of innovation might actually be happening all over the world, but people are using different types of language to talk about it. So they don't necessarily see themselves as being part of a movement. So the idea of the book Disruption Revolution was to look at all these people that were talking about innovation and transformation in unique ways and try and look at them as creating this kind of disruption revolution, this revolution of innovation. So I wanted to market and launch the book in an innovative way. I made the book available by donation. And it was really kind of a bold move on my part also, because I was almost completely out of money at the time, to the point where I was literally like, how am I going to pay my rent if this doesn't go well? But the book ended up going viral. Within 2 weeks, I ended up getting a job offer from from a company that was based in Dubai, and ended up going there to be their head of innovation and research. This company called Dubizzle, which is kind of like an eBay or Craigslist of the Middle East. It's the largest marketplace in the Middle East, sixth most visited site in the country. So I was there for a year. That position ended up getting eliminated when the company was acquired, and they fired 40% of the company. But I ended up going from that to then writing another book, and then spent about the last, I'd say, 12 years writing and speaking and giving talks around the world on innovation, on empathy, on community building, things like that. And then over the course of all that time, I continued to have a meditation practice. I continued to do the types of practices that I studied, that I started doing when I was 19, and then when I went through graduate school. And what I found was that over the years, I would adjust my practice based upon what was going on in my life. So, for example, there were times when I was speaking to, was going to 20 to 25 countries a year, giving talks and workshops, and I had this kind of experimental lifestyle where I was living out of one small suitcase, and I wanted to kind of like talk about, being this digital nomad. I was one of kind of the first people to really do that as a career. So when I was doing stuff like that, I would do these more like body center practices so that I could get on stage and feel confident and not feel triggered and things like that. And then when I was doing more kind of client related stuff or things related to relationships, I would do more heart centered practices. So things around loving kindness and mindfulness and emotional intelligence and things like that. And then when I was writing books or thinking of visionary stuff about the future, I would do more things that were activating my pineal gland and prefrontal cortex and things like that. So I intuitively started to develop this approach to doing practice based upon what was going on in my life. And then over the last 3 years, I've really started to systematize those practices and want to teach them in a way that other people can do them. Because the biggest thing I've learned over nearly 30 years of doing these types of practices is people are always saying, okay, I really want to meditate. What should I do? Or I really want to learn breath work or something like that. And my response is always, well, tell me a little bit more about you, or a little bit more about what you want to do. Because there's this kind of view that all these practices, they lead to the same goal. And so they're somehow all the same. And that's not really true. Like if you went to a gym, for example, and the person there said, oh, you can use any machine or go to any class because it's all fitness, they would be like, well, no, like they would tell you do certain things for strength training, or do certain things for endurance, or do certain things to lose weight or to build muscle, or whatever your fitness goals were. They would tell you specific things based upon your goals. And I've realized that type of approach is not the way these practices are typically taught. So I want to take what I would call a polymathic approach of teaching them, and that's really been what I'm most passionate about doing, what I've been working on for the last few years, and where my heart really lies the most now. So that's sort of my life story leading up to now.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that intro. And you know what? I just want to observe.
Yeah.
You're a very impressive person. And it's not even for me, it's not even because of Princeton or your degrees or the
Mm.
books you've written. It's just that you have chosen to craft your own life based on your own rules. You've chosen to
Yeah.
live from your values, and you've become lucid in the process.
Yeah.
And that's fucking cool.
I
That's
appreciate
awesome.
that.
Yeah, like you have crafted your own personhood. You haven't settled for work you don't want to do, or stuff that's not feeling like you're in integrity. Like you have crafted a life so you can live and contribute in a way that feels true to you. You've said, I'm not going to
Yes.
pay attention to the rules that other people are telling me. I'm going to make up my own rules. And that's really what we all should do, in my opinion. Now, yes, we are part of community. We're part of a globe. We're part of a nation. We're part of a city. We're part of lots of collectives. And we do absolutely need to care about other people. I'm not saying that we, I just think we're all responsible for our own lives. And you are a gleaming example of somebody who has made your life into what you want it to be. And
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
contribute and help other people and be an example. And this thing that you built, this website, this app, you have taken years of hard work on your own personhood, and you have synthesized it down to these practices, and you've packaged it in such a way that it's digestible and understandable and easier. And people don't have to go figure out all these things. They can just look at your website, look at your app, and go, oh, let me learn about this and let me try that out and find what fits for me. Not all practices are going to be for everybody, right?
Right.
But by tackling things from different angles, you're more likely to get to the root of whatever's going on in your life, and resolve it, and to heal yourself, and to step into your own realness and authenticity through these tools by centering yourself, tuning in. You got it. Yes, the environment's crazy and chaotic, and we got to talk about that. Oh my God, AI, the economy, the pandemic. I mean, we are at a unique point in history right now. I feel it. Things are
Yeah,
changing real
absolutely.
big in big ways. The internet was huge. AI maybe even huger. Can we talk about AI? Can we talk about AI?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's jam on AI. Where do we begin? I'm going to let you start. What are your thoughts on AI? Just share what's going on in your mind.
Well, so let me take a step back and say that I first started to work on the what I call the subconscious fitness system. So I first started to work on this six years ago, and I had when I had an interview with Martin Ford. So Martin Ford wrote the book Rise of the Robots. It was an international bestseller. And Martin Ford is, one of the world renowned experts on the impact of AI and automation. And to be honest with you, he painted a vision of the future that terrified the shit out of me because it was like, everything was going to, he painted a vision that everything was going to happen so fast and so many people were going to be displaced and there would be a need for some type of universal basic income because people would not have any jobs and all this sort of stuff. And, um, and that terrified me. And I thought, well, if there's going to be all of this external change, we should not just assume that people are going to be replaced and all that sort of stuff. We also have to assume that all of this AI and creative tools are going to also spark all types of different types of companies and businesses and creativity and innovation more than has really happened in human history. And so we can look at AI as an opportunity to augment our abilities, as an opportunity to augment what we initially think is possible. I've been spending a lot of time with AI tools, and I'm constantly on them every day. I used AI to learn to teach myself how to code my app, how to create a responsive website, how to do all different types of things that I did not think was possible. And what I've found is that um, being able to do something that I previously did not think was possible, something that I thought I might have had to spend, $10,000-$20,000 on, or have to hire someone and have that sense of dependency upon someone else. It was just so incredibly empowering and exciting. And I feel like it's AI tools for me are really opening up just a huge kind of infinite amount of possibility and hope about the future. And when I think of, I think specifically of polymaths. I think of people who are watching this and who would consider themselves someone who's constantly going from one discipline to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and so on. AI is going to completely destroy and really disrupt traditional ways of doing education. It's gonna disrupt traditional disciplinary boundaries. Conventional education up to this point has been focused mostly on memorizing things, right? You just kind of like, you read something and you either do an essay or you take a multiple choice test or something like that, and trying to demonstrate that you somehow have some type of basic competency about things. Well, now with AI, you can basically ask any type of question to have any, like, it's almost like you're able to download the basic level of competency that they're teaching in schools. You're able to access the type of memorization, rote memorization stuff at any time. And so now we need to think about education and learning differently. It's not about constantly memorizing things. It's about, okay, how do I think? How do I create dialogue? How do I optimize for the things that are uniquely human? So things like creativity, emotional intelligence, resilience, purpose. And a big focus of mine with the subconscious fitness work is that these practices can be utilized to cultivate those types of traits. It's funny. This is a little bit of a tangent, but I had a conversation last night at a dinner party with someone who's a social worker and clinical psychologist, and he works primarily with people of color. And he told me that he said, well, most of my clients are not interested in mindfulness because they feel like that's telling them to feel a certain way, and that somehow they feel like a part of their challenge is to become decolonized. They feel like these practices are telling them to be passive, They're telling them to accept things. They're telling them to be kind of limited, to be mindful of oppressive structures. And it really hit me because there's a way in which these practices have been communicated in the West that is totally fundamentally wrong. That they've been psychologized, have been kind of put in these sort of little boxes. And actually, these types of practices can be incredibly powerful to help remove the kind of constraints and limitations that we've internalized and help us to interact with AI. I mean, I get incredibly excited. Like I think about growing old in the future. So, for example, I'm 48 years old. I don't think I'm going to have any children. And traditionally, as people grow older, it would be their children that would be taking care of them. I have a personal sense of incredible comfort that there will be these AI tools and these AI support mechanisms to augment my longevity and my health and well-being as I get older. I have my stepfather has Alzheimer's dementia. I think of the tremendous possibility these tools can be to him. There's so much possibility and hope around them. And it's really frustrating that a lot of the news just focuses on this. Oh my gosh, it's going to eliminate jobs. Oh my gosh, it's going to destroy education and so on. But there's so much hope and opportunity from AI, and that I feel like we need to this really is like a point where a kind of reset button for the future of humanity. Anyways, I feel like I could just keep going on and on about this.
Yes, I've just made some notes for myself because I want to respond to a few things you said.
Yeah.
First off, I want to just acknowledge and mirror back from what you told me that you
Yeah.
wanted to learn how to code and make websites. And isn't life so much better when you have a goal and you accomplish it? That's
Yeah.
great, right? We all like to accomplish our goals, but how do you get there? Like if there's something you want that you don't have yet, often you must learn how to get it. You must
Yeah.
study, you must read, you must listen, you must absorb so you could figure out how to do it. And a lot of times things aren't even as hard as you thought it was before going into it. Like you thought,
Yeah.
oh, I could never do that. I could never make an empathy flow conference without a big company backing it or something like that. But I'm pretty sure you
Yeah.
did, right? Because I
Yeah.
think that's how David and I met. For anyone watching this wondering how we met, David put together an empathy flow conference. Was that in 2020 or 21?
Yeah. It was at the end of
2020.
2020.
It was an online conference. I was a panelist in one of the sessions. So we got on each other's radar. And then you joined Polymath Place on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And I have witnessed your thinking. I have read things you wrote. And I think you get it. You get it. You are a thought leader, I think, on planet Earth. You're lucid. That's how I would describe it. So I just want to say that I give you kudos for learning your way into new levels of achievement. And that's what David's example can be for all of us. If you have a goal, realize you may have to learn your way through it so you can achieve what you want. Learning is critical on this human journey. I also will say,
Absolutely.
I have been in the polymathy space in one way or another since 2015 when I started my doctoral program, finished it in 2018. And then I've been trying to figure out how can I get these ideas out there? How can I promote this concept that we don't have to put ourselves in boxes and silos and cages of specialization? We don't have to participate in our own dehumanization or colonization, as you put it. Certainly, people of color are heavily colonized, but I have deep empathy and sympathy for the hardships that other human beings have put people of color throughout history. I get it, and it's horrible. But we're all colonized. We're all brainwashed in one way or another, if you ask me. When we allow a dominant narrative to take over and tell us how to live our lives, like we caught
Yes.
a virus, all of us have, at some point or another, done what we thought is expected of us, because we should. And many times we should. It's the right thing to do what we're told to do. But sometimes what we're told to do doesn't fit or doesn't feel right or isn't moral or isn't ethical or isn't living, which is the point of life, by the way, is to live it, to really live, not just be alive. So I just want to say that. The other thing I want to comment on is you mentioned about memory. Now, as a scholar, this is my point I'm trying to get to. I'll get there eventually. Um, in the polymathy studies space, there aren't a lot of scholars, there aren't a lot of thinkers, but there are some. I have deep respect for the people in this field, and I'm so glad that they're helping promote these ideas. But a lot of what has happened in the polymathy space is it has become associated with the intellect and memory. How much can you learn and store? And nowadays, we don't even need to store it all. We can retrieve it.
Nowadays, that type of definition, uh, not just of polymathy, but I would say of being a human in general, because that type of like reductionist, this kind of post-colonial view that everything is constructed and relative, and life has no inherent meaning and purpose. Now we're at a point where it's like, okay, if that's really all that there is, then how are you different than AI? Because
Exactly.
AI can do pattern recognition and synthesis and analysis. It can do all of those things better than a human. And if you're saying that all humans are is that, then you're actually saying you're no better than a machine. There's no way for someone to justify their presence as a human, as a teacher, if that limited definition of being human is what you subscribe to. I
Yeah,
personally really strongly believe that the part of the one of the things that the rise of AI is going to do, it's going to force humans to reimagine what it means to be human, because we need to find a way to differentiate ourselves from these tools, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and if polymathy is just I've learned a lot of things and I store it in my memory, then we're even less advanced than tech because tech can store things in its memory. For me, the more I am in the polymath space, the more I'm just obsessed with this concept. And
Yeah.
it's been nearly a decade of pure obsession, daily thinking about polymathy for a significant portion of my adult life. I've come to the conclusion it's really not just many learnings, it's really not just memory storage. It's really an orientation to living fully, having the full human experience. It's not just memory storage. It's I would synthesize it. If I had to put it in a catchphrase, I'd say it's being all in it life. I'm here and I'm going to go with the flow of what the universe presents me with, challenges and opportunities. And I'm also going to steer my own ship in that flow to create a
Yeah.
person I can respect and love and that I want to be. And I'm going to love and respect myself, even with my flaws and who I am right now. But
Well,
it gives us opportunity to create ourselves, to write our own code.
I want to say, I think that you should also think about your relationship with these types of AI tools in that way as well. That these tools are empowering you to automate the things that maybe you don't want to do, so that you can do the things, so that you can focus on the things that you want to do faster. So, for example, like a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll have like an idea of something that I want to write, and I'll do kind of a brain dump to AI and just get all my thoughts out, and then it will organize them for me. And then I take that outline and I polish that into something that I want to share. So it's helped me to like on a deeper intuitive level, I understand the relationship and the points that I want to make, but it takes a lot of cognitive power to, okay, I have to now break these 10 points and organize them in a very simple way, that's coherent way that someone else can access. If I'm able to do that, to use these tools to do that faster, it helps me to get more done faster, and it liberates my creative energy to focus on really kind of creative stuff. Because one of the challenges with like flow is, and productivity and performance is you're constantly trying to, like, you really want to be in the zone and focus on the things that are most important to you. And when you have to get stuck in the details and you have to get stuck in like the nitty gritty, sometimes it throws you off. And so these tools are incredibly powerful and helpful for that. I also
Yeah.
want to say, since you mentioned the Empathy Flow conference, so I started that at the beginning of the pandemic. I was actually feeling incredibly isolated, So I was in Thailand. I was in Bangkok. I was by myself, and I started seeing all of this just kind of collective anxiety and fear around the world. I initially just wanted to create a Facebook group to kind of put positive messages out there. That turned it into a group of a few thousand people, and that eventually led to creating a conference. But one of the things that I want to talk about in particular there, related to what you were talking about, is that empathy and compassion are not the same things. And
Right.
a lot of times, so empathy, I would say, is you're trying to understand and appreciate the perspective of someone else. And the best way to do that is by asking questions and creating space for open dialogue. Compassion is where you're just focusing on unconditional loving kindness and support of someone else. A lot of times, people think that empathy, or people think that compassion can lead to struggle. Like, they think that a lot of times, caregivers or people that are doing impact work, a lot of times they start getting burnout. Burnout is especially prominent among people who are doing work to try and help other people. The burnout actually doesn't happen from being compassionate. The burnout happens from empathy. The burnout happens when you start to identify with the suffering of someone else and take it upon yourself. So if you're caring for someone who has cancer, for example, or you're caring for someone that has some sort of terminal illness or some sort of struggle, or maybe they're dealing with depression or whatever, when you start to identify with those problems, that's when you start to suffer. You start to think, because ultimately you are not responsible for someone else's life. What you want to do is you want to empower them with as much tools and support as they can to make that transformation. You want to create a supportive environment. You do that through creating safe spaces for dialogue, and you do that through compassion. But empathy and compassion are two different things. And a lot of times that distinction is not very clear for people, and it leads to all types of misunderstandings and problems. I would say that that's probably the biggest insight that's come from me from doing that conference and from this work. The other thing I would say is that, going back to this idea of feeling like we're being controlled, or we should think of human nature. Our subconscious, our brains, and our nervous system are designed to protect ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and we remember negative things more than positive. So you think, for example, you may have gone to like a restaurant 100 times, but then you have a bad experience and you go tell your friends, you leave a negative review, and it's like all the good stuff that happened just kind of went out the window, and you remember only the bad thing. The problem with society today is that all of our news is optimized around the bad stuff. All of our political messaging is optimized around the bad stuff. All of the you look at most entertainment. I wrote a post about a couple months ago. It was something like 80% of the plots for TV series and for popular movies is based upon some type of murder or conflict or fear or something like that. And so we're living in this society where our subconscious, our brains, and our nervous system, we have this kind of predisposition to respond to fear, to be anxious, to kind of shrink in and protect ourselves. And that view is just reinforced everywhere. And then on top of that, we're in a world where there's just we're continually bombarded with ads and telling us that we need certain types of things to be successful or to feel complete. And so there's a way in which, like, our sense of self, our self of identity becomes externalized, and at the same time there's all this fear and anxiety, and it's really tearing society apart. I mean, it really breaks my heart, because we just have this one kind of unifying narrative, and people think they have to just keep repeating these stories over and over, like they're just kind of alienated from who they are. And it really makes me incredibly sad, because I feel like there's just an incredible amount of infinite potential and creativity and hope and love inside of people. And there's just this story of this limited view of themselves and limited view of other people, and they just don't see it.
You know what the
And
kicker is too? And by the
yes,
way, I studied media at the Annenberg
yeah,
School at USC for 4 years. And it's here's the kicker of it is the map is not the territory. The story is not the truth. It's an
yes,
interpretation of the truth. And so we shrivel ourselves and we believe these narratives, and they're not even the full truth. They're just what will sell, what will grab attention, what will be stimulating to our emotional reactions and get us fired up and or afraid. Here's what
yeah.
scares me about this. The media is incredibly powerful. They are the source of much of our programming, and we blindly accept it. My favorite book ever, I recommend everybody read it, is called Four Arguments for the Elimination of Television. It was written by Jerry Mander, and his name is literally Jerry Mander. um, he wrote this in, I think, 60s or 70s. He was a marketing guy, and he knew what marketing does is incredibly sick. And
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, what we do to other human beings to get to spread a thought virus that's not even really good for them or the truth, the full truth.
I call it outsourcing who you are.
Yeah, or
So
outsourcing thinking.
yeah, the idea that there's all of these stories and all this sense of like intensity and beliefs and stuff coming in, and what social media actually makes this worse because there's a sense that when you're the first person to comment or the first person to share or forward or like something, when you're not critically thinking about it, there's an incentive structure for you to like things and to share things that you uncritically, and it just creates this situation where people are constantly outsourcing who they are. They're outsourcing their thinking, their views, and they're creating these very rigid this very rigid sense of identity of there's people like me and there's people who are not like me. And I found this especially with my work on empathy. One of the things that's really challenging about empathy is I would say a majority of people believe that empathy that there's a lack of empathy is a real problem, and they feel like, oh, people don't understand me, but I understand them. But at the same time, very few people will say, you know what, I actually need to learn how to better understand people. I need to learn how to better have dialogue. There's the sense that people think that they are empathetic, but actually talking about empathy, talking about these types of things, oftentimes it's like, okay, people who have empathy and emotional intelligence are people who are just like me, and people who are not like me are so different. And there's this weird kind of situation where it's like this language of emotional intelligence and empathy and stuff actually becomes a way where people try to define, oh, these people that are different are people that hate me and they're filled with hate and anxiety and they want to control me and stuff like that. It's really just this kind of really weird sort of situation that we're in now in the
I
modern
agree.
world.
You know what we all should do when we have bandwidth, mental, emotional time, resources, bandwidth. If there's someone very, very different from us, someone who has a different set of belief systems, different experiences in life, different socioeconomic status, it's those people we should work to form our empathy on.
Yeah.
It's those people we should work to understand, because this whole in group, out group bullshit humanity's been doing ever since the beginning has caused nothing but problems, because what that ideology says is that if you're like me, you're good. And if you're different from me, you're bad. And it makes us all, it pressures us all to become similar and jump into an echo chamber and never leave it. And then wars start and murders get done and we do horrible, heinous things to each other under the guise of, I love my group so much, I'll do violence against anyone who's different. And we cannot keep doing that because, for obvious reasons, many of the religious teachers tried to show us this. Jesus tried to tell us, do unto others as you would have done unto you. So many religious teachers have tried to tell us, you can't keep being rude and hurtful and dehumanizing and killing and murdering your own species and expect it to work out well. Hello. And on top of that, um, when we understand people who are different, we do begin to see, oh, if I was in their shoes, I might have reacted just the same way if I had their experiences. And it does allow us to develop empathy and compassion, both, I would say, when we get to understand a story of somebody else who's different. And it's fascinating, it's interesting, and it allows us to collaborate and to be on the same team, the human team. And I would argue we
Yeah.
should, you know, it's horrible what human beings have done to each other based on skin color, socioeconomic status, sex, sexual orientation, all of that bullshit, which none of us got to pick and none of us can change. Our bodies are what we got for the most part. We inherited it and didn't have a say in when we show up here on earth, what family, what traumas, what body, what skin color, what IQ level, what genitalia. Like, we didn't get to pick any of that, and yet we make that the basis for why we reject each other. I hope if we can really embrace the values of polymathy, that it allows some bridges to be built. Because then we go, you care about empathy and compassion? Me too. Let's be friends. And we combine our concern or our passions, and we link together on those issues regardless of, oh, you're a man, oh, you don't live near me, oh, you had a different experience. Like, no, I don't care about that anymore. I just care that we can connect on the content of our passions, and it's a much more sustainable and good way to be. um Real
Yeah.
quick, sorry, go ahead, you go ahead.
Well, no, I would also say I agree with everything that you said there. I would also add that because of the environment that we're living in, uh, the pervasive influence of technology and these bombarding messages and stuff like that, it's impossible for us to escape them. And the way that our brains, bodies, and nervous system are designed, it's also impossible for us to not be impacted by them. But we can proactively reprogram. We can proactively train and transform our brains, bodies, and nervous system, doing different types of practices that I'm now teaching. So like what I did with subconscious fitness is, I took a very polymathic approach to understanding practices like meditation, breath work, different types of energy and movement practices, because I wanted people to be able to make informed decisions about how to find the right practice based upon their needs in any situation. So the way that I approached it, first I read about 700 books over the last 3 years, in addition to all the training that I've done over the last, nearly 30 years, including my graduate training. But I focused on what I call the energy matter matrix. So I focus on every practice, basically physiologically what happens to you in terms of how practices impact your brain, how they impact your nervous system, the different energy centers in your body. And then focus on how, at an energetic level, what is the traditional view that these practices do, and then the types of specific benefits that you can have in the context that you might do them. So, like the average lifelong meditator by the age of 50, their brain is 7.5 years younger than a normal person. A 7.5 year younger brain means you have more gray matter. It means you have a stronger prefrontal cortex. You're able to make better decisions. You're able to be more resilient, to learn skills faster. These are the types of things that are essential for the future. You think of a world where there's just constant technology, we're constantly bombarded with things. It's important to cultivate emotional intelligence. It's important to connect with your heart center. So physiologically, in your body, your heart and your lungs basically act as one. Your heart and your lungs are like a second brain. So you have two different strands of your nervous system. You have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is more focused on relaxation and being calm. Then you have the sympathetic nervous system, which is more kind of elevated and amped and focused. You also have your hormone system that also is monitored by your heart. So we actually get most of our energy from breathing, not from our food. You'll actually notice if you weigh yourself before you go to bed and weigh yourself in the morning, you'll be about a half pound to a pound lighter in the morning when you wake up. It's because you have exhaled carbon, you have exhaled excess carbon that your body has processed while you're sleeping. So you literally lose more weight by breathing better, and you regulate your emotions and your energy and all that stuff by breathing better. So these types of practices can help to regulate you physiologically. They can help you to be more agile and to train you cognitively, and they can help you to have more energy to sustain you throughout the day. You can literally train and transform your brain, body, and nervous system to adapt to these types of environments. And these types of practices, there's two different ways of thinking about change. There's the approach on like the perspective on like beliefs and like theory and knowledge, traditional approaches to knowledge and kind of the story. And then there's the more kind of integrative approach of like, okay, how am I using my breathing and how am I thinking of an overarching, just kind of allowing order to emerge, a kind of deeper sort of integrative sense of transformation, which is different than dialogue. So integrative types of transformation was especially helpful for me, for example, when I was dealing with trauma. So I had all sorts of conflicting, very like complex emotions. And a lot of times in traditional approaches to therapy, it's like you want to come up with a story that's strong enough to explain why you feel so bad. And then you become attached to that story and you feel like a victim instead of just being able to kind of process your emotions and allow yourself to work through that complexity at a deeper subconscious level. So there's a myriad of ways in which these types of practices can help. And I would last say, especially for polymaths, that when you do different types of meditation, breath work, these types of practices, you become less reactionary. You become less attached to preconceived ways of being, and you're able to kind of hold a space where you can look at things and say, okay, I can look at what I need in the short term. I can look at what I need in the long term, and you're able to make those types of informed decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think that ultimately, I think the essence of being a polymath is being able to look at multiple different perspectives and be able to integrate them in a more kind of holistic way, right? And these types of practices can help you to do that. A lot of times, like you have the story and ideas, and they're like moving around, and intuitively, okay, this thing on the surface is not it. It's actually the real story is a little bit deeper, and somehow you want to allow that story to emerge. I actually teach practices to help to hack your subconscious and have these kind of insight moments as well, which is really kind of fascinating.
Yeah. You know what? I don't know if this would be considered a practice, but one of the things I love to do, and I've kind of gotten in the habit of doing over the past few years, during when the pandemic started to, I was so isolated, like so many of us were, and maybe still are, but I started journaling, I started writing, and it just helped me analyze what's really going on in my life. And then it also allowed me to go, okay, I've detached enough from my own, I can write it and then I can read it and I can see myself like I'm looking in from the outside. And then I love to just be alone with my own thoughts. I really do. I'm such a nerd. I love the world of thought. I love talking and learning from other people, especially the more different from me they are. That's my favorite kind of person to learn from. I also love to learn from my own self. I know that sounds incredibly egotistical, but I know if I tune in and tune up to my higher self, because I do believe we have spirits, or something like that. I don't know what the right word is, but I do believe there's an intelligent source from whence we came that we remain connected to if we allow that connection to be noticed, to tune into it. And I just love to like ask myself questions and see what comes up. It's like a fun game.
Absolutely.
Tuning in. I wanted to say too, another reason why being a polymathic kind of person is so important in the age of AI is because AI can do so much to push us forward. And I want to talk in a minute too about people who have a negative slant on AI and fear, the fear response. I'd like to talk about that next, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
But we are in an age of misinformation. We talked about the media is a business that exists for a profit, and they want to keep their jobs, and so they got to sell stuff that sells. If it bleeds, it leads. That's what people who've studied media would be familiar with that. Sorry, that came across wrong. I've studied the media, and that's what I was taught. If it bleeds, it leads, and that fits for me. But if it's true that we've been in the information age and now we've transitioned into the age of misinformation, uh, then being holistic, having a lot of experiences and tools in your toolkit, and the ability to think and an orientation towards openness and curiosity and bravery, which takes more mental work. It's easier. It's an easier mental heuristic, an intellectual shortcut to hear something and just believe it. It takes more work to question and analyze and seek out the opposite truth and see
Well,
which
it's
one
not
is.
it's not only that, but I think society is. I mean, you can even go back to the way that the education system is set up, especially in the U.S. It's not this way all around the world, but the education system in the U.S. is optimized around standardized testing, and so people are not taught how to critically think. They're taught how to perform a very specific predetermined role based upon this kind of very limited view of education. It's actually the whole education system is actually designed to help teach people how to be obedient and do things in a
Yes.
very kind of limited, constricted way. And now we're at this kind of crisis moment because um, a lot of society has optimized being human around things that now machines can do better than us. So, AI can do pattern recognition. It can do the type of repetitive memorization. It can do very sort of simple synthesis and analysis. It can do, of course, mathematics and all different types of things like that. It can do all of those things better than humans, and so there's this real kind of crisis moment where a lot of people like the media is saying, oh my gosh, what happens to education? People are just going to cheat. Well, instead of the conversation being, okay, maybe it's time to teach people how to deal with creative problems, how to learn independently, how to function as how to grow up and function as adults in a society where they can co-evolve with technology. I mean, the entire narrative needs to shift. Instead of thinking about, I think of David Graeber's book, for example, Bullshit Jobs, where he has this thesis that basically a lot of modern society, going back to like the 1930s, there was like economists used to speculate, okay, going back to Keynes and some of the early economists, they used to speculate that as technology got better and better and better, we could have maybe a 10 to 15-hour work week, because machines could continue to do more and more work and produce a more productive and healthy society. Instead, there's been this proliferation of what Graeber calls bullshit jobs, where basically people who are doing mindless administrative work or mindless type of, like, if you were to go and interview the people who are really worried about their jobs being replaced, they would probably tell you, well, actually, my job is kind of meaningless. I
My
just sit
job
around and
sucks.
process paperwork. My job sucks. And so we could be thinking of AI as an opportunity to liberate us to do more creative things, to do more things that are interesting, and to really improve the future of society. But instead, we're in this view where the narrative on TV is about, it's going to replace jobs, it's going to destroy education, all this negative benefits, and that's just amplifying a lot of fear and anxiety. And that's really concerning, and it's also really sad, because I truly believe that this is the most creative and innovative period in human history. It's just starting to begin. And I also truly believe that the way that we evolve as a species is through having more creativity, empathy, and emotional intelligence, and through having a kind of collective awakening, a great awakening, that there is actually much more to life. There's much more to being human than just sort of constantly buying things and following a preconceived way of doing things and living in this kind of box that you're doing what you're told.
Yes. I have a few things I want to respond to there. You pointed out, like, people are very concerned what happens to education. By the way, my doctoral degree is in education, and I worked in adult education for nearly a decade, most of my adult life. And so I absolutely think about education. But even the word education, it slants towards business. It slants towards organized gatherings. It slants towards, you know, packages you buy or something. And that's all fine and good. But the thing I like better than education is learning.
Yes.
Because it takes the power out of someone else educating me, and I get to be in charge of my own learning now. I'm in charge of my learning. That's what polymaths do. They are self directed, lifelong learners. If I had to summarize a polymath approach to life, that's what it is. It's a fundamental openness, curiosity, bravery, and willingness to self author.
Yes.
And so that's one thing I want to point out, that education's good, but learning's better because it puts the onus on us where it should be. Um, I also want to
I would just piggyback on that and say that also, especially when you think of things that have been challenging for you,
Mhm.
like let's say you've had a difficult experience that was emotionally challenging or traumatic, when you're able to create space between your story about the experience and yourself, that's when real wisdom comes.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Can you say that again? Please say that again. We need to hear that.
there's an event or experience, and there's your story about that
Yes.
experience. And when you're able to create distance between those two, that's when real, or separation or space, that's when real wisdom emerges.
And then I want to take that a step further. Power from your experience emerges when you change the narrative yourself. You
Yeah.
don't let the story be what society would have you believe about your experiences. You become an alchemist and you take difficulty and you say, thank you for that difficulty, universe. I'm going to use that to make
Yeah.
myself better. I'm going to use that difficulty to show myself what I'm made of. I'm going to use that difficulty to make myself into the person I want to be. I'm going to be in the moment and craft my reactions, knowing I'm going to tell a story about this later. And I want to make it a good story. That's where the magic
Yes.
comes in. When in the moment, you take control of your living and write your own story. Um, I actually think that I want to get back to the fear question real quick, because I think a lot of what life comes down to, not just in this time, but in all of time and all experiences, there are fundamentally two paths. Something difficult happens and you got to make sense of it, or you got to react to it. And there is a path of fear and there is a path of love or acceptance or openness. And if you analyze life enough, you begin to see, oh, what would the fear reaction be? What would the love reaction be? What would the fear reaction be? What would the love reaction be? And you get to choose what you're made of. Do you sink into fear, or do you step into your capacity? Do you evolve? Do you actualize by embracing expansiveness rather than shriveling?
Well, I think you embrace expansiveness and openness, but also I think that fear can also be a sign that you're onto something, because
Mm,
when you're experiencing fear, especially in relationship to new ideas or new perspectives, fear is when you're going out of your comfort zone. You go back to what I was talking about earlier about our nervous system and how we're kind of programmed to avoid risk. Sometimes in a busy modern society, we have this ancient programming that tells us to be afraid of doing things, stepping out of our comfort zone, and sometimes actually going out there and doing something that's bold and facing your fear and saying, you know what, I'm going to transform my relationship with fear, and I'm going to go out and do something with kind of openness and love and creativity and positivity. That's where the real breakthroughs happen.
yes.
I think right now of what I'm doing with the subconscious fitness stuff. Um, I'm breaking traditions that go back thousands of years in terms of how you should teach these practices. I'm breaking with a lot of traditions in terms of trying to either psychologize them and place them in a box, or try to say, oh, I have to have my identity associated with them, and I become a Buddhist or I become a Hindu or I become whatever. I somehow, like, by doing these practices, I have to kind of anchor my identity in some tradition. I want to, I had a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety around putting this together. And I'd say it's partly why I went, in many ways, kind of over the top in terms of the amount of research and depth that I went into, because I really wanted people to be able to make informed decisions, say, you know what, you can do this. You can transform your life. And here's a toolbox of practices that empowers you to do that. As AI is going to keep coming on, there's going to continue to be these stories around people are losing jobs and education is disrupted and people are cheating, and like, because like the old way of doing things, this narrative is going to be there. And there's a the narrative is coming from an incredibly powerful power structure that we've been living in. And I truly believe that AI is going to empower especially the younger generation to break through and reimagine what it means to be human and reimagine the future of society. And it's going to crush some of these traditional power structures. And it's going to happen across different types of social platforms and video sharing. It's going to happen outside of the conventional controlled media and conventional controlled politics. And we're going to see I think it's going to start to happen in our lifetime, but we're really at this kind of critical point in the overall history of humanity where there's going to be a fundamental shift. People are going to look back like hundreds of years from now and say, boy, in 2023, that's when it really began. Because we're at the we're what I call the bridge generation. We're the last generation to grow up in an analog world. We're the first generation to grow up in a universe where there are tools that are actually more intelligent than us. And that's really kind of hard. That's a really fundamental shift to be able to have these tools that can enhance our creativity, enhance our ability to build things, enhance our ability to come up with new connections, new ideas, new ways of being. There's entirely new technologies and ways of living that we can't even imagine today.
Yeah. Life is but a dream.
Yeah.
So, a couple things I want to say in response, and I want to ask you some questions too. But I just want to say on fear, just real quick on fear. I do think fear is valuable. It's an emotion, it's a response, it's part of us, it's appropriate frequently. I mean, saber-toothed tiger was running after me. I need that fear and I need that adrenaline rush. Like it is, there's even a book called The Gift of Fear. And I recognize, especially we're part animal and we're part sentience, soul, consciousness, whatever. We're both. And for our animal suit, our meat suit, we really need fear to survive. And so I'm grateful for my fearful part for keeping me alive all these years, from burning to death, or
Absolutely.
starving to death, or God no, getting run over by a car. My fear is a gift, but it can also be a real shrinker, shriveler of our personhood if we let it rule the roost of our decision making in our lives. I want to share something real quick too. For some reason, when I was when I was in junior high, I was such a nerd. I started participating in speech competitions. Now, as you know, that's a fear many people have, is public speaking, and especially for a young person, speaking in person in public, it was nerve wracking. And I began to practice it enough that I realized, oh, I can use my fear as fuel if I harness it just right. And I made the decision. I realized early on in life, as a 12 or 13-year-old, that I need to harness and master my fear reaction, not let it master me. So I started doing things like when I was 18, I went skydiving. And I am not an adrenaline junkie. I am not athletic. I am not any of the things you would associate with a skydiver. But I decided I'm going to go through fear and come out the other side. And that is an exercise that will help me in my life. And I've done many adventure sports, bungee jumping, and oh God, if you name it, I've tried it. And I probably didn't even enjoy it. But I got through it. And the thing I like to say is make fear your bitch. Listen to it, notice it, and then get in charge of your fear. Don't let it be in charge of you. Because if you do, it ruins lives, yours and other people's too. Another thing I want to say is, oh, and by the way, one of our most common fears is fear of change. And that's what we're seeing right now with the reaction we're having to AI. I personally am very excited that AI is here. It's our creation. And I believe, this is just my intuitive belief, that there's a real, and this is also based on Ray Kurzweil's, I don't know if you know Kurzweil. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I've been following him for many, many years. And I knew all of this was coming probably a long time before the average person did because of Ray Kurzweil's very important work predicting future advancements
Mm-hmm.
in technology. Tremendous amount of respect and gratitude that he did that because it allowed me to mentally prepare myself and sort of be ahead of the curve in some ways. And part of why I studied polymathy is because I could tell it would be very important in our advanced world where life is a dream. It becomes like a dream. You can't believe the world we're entering. It's here. It's starting. Oh my God. Okay. Um, Power is being distributed. That's part of what's happening too. There's a revolution. It's been happening for a while, but power is being distributed more to individuals rather than groups. And that's how it should be, I think. I also want to say that we've touched upon a little bit originality. You mentioned the word originality earlier a while ago in this conversation. And I just want to talk about that because one of the best routes to create your own original personhood is through polymathic approaches. You try a lot of things, you learn a lot of things, you expose yourself to a lot of information and types of people, and then you figure out what fits for you. What do I like? What do I believe? What do I stand for of all the options I've looked at? And if you don't sample, if you don't have that versatile exploration, you're not well positioned to choose. You just got to choose from a small limited options. But if you open the aperture, if you give yourself more options, you can choose better all the elements of your life so that it fits and feels good for you. So sampling is important. Then you take what you've been exposed to and you figure out what you believe, what you like, what you want to do. And I hope and I wish for people that they create a unique combination. Like if we all just follow our natural intuitive joy, ease, if we tune into what we are, then we create a unique combination that's never been done before. Nobody ever had your exact experiences, your exact exposure at this time, at that place, in that body, in that country, at that company, whatever it may have been. And it is through creating originality in our personhood by following our joy, we're actually helping humanity evolve. Let me say
Yes.
that again. That if you want to be a part of human evolution, create your personhood as originally as possible. Stop being a copy. We are taught and brainwashed and pressured to be like everyone else in the herd. Don't even be in a herd anymore. You don't need one.
Well,
Be
that's why, for a similar reason, that's why I usually don't use words like awaken or manifesting or enlightenment or things like that. Cause I think of the types of practices that I teach more as a form of conscious evolution.
yes.
That humanity is going through some fundamental shifts right now, and it's really hard for us to understand what they are because we're going through them. But humanity is going to transform and evolve into something that is a way of being that is much different than it was, even just like 20, 30 years ago. I feel like the transformations that are starting to happen in our lifetime are going to be so radical. Not only that, but also humans will start to live longer, so there's much more longevity.
Yep.
Um, People will also be able to, with AI, they will be able to make the types of breakthroughs and insights that maybe it may have taken you and I to get into our 40s. They might be able to make the same types of synthesis and integration insights in their teens or 20s. And I try and imagine, like, what would it be like to have the types of insights that I'm having now when I was just a teenager. And
Mm-hmm.
it's actually now possible. I mean, the AI presents opportunities for customized one-on-one learning, for accelerating growth, for identifying personal weaknesses, and I mean, it's just a I mean, going back to, you think of like some of the great thinkers in history, they were like Newton, or you think of like Bach, or these different types of Copernicus, or like going back in history. a lot of the great thinkers in history were so revolutionary because they had teams of tutors with them from an early age. There was a
Mhm.
total different approach to education, and AI now presents that same type of opportunity to, you could train people in the classics, you could train people in mathematics, you could train people in philosophy, and train people in critical thinking starting from a very early age. They would turn into completely different types of humans by the time they are adults. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just there's just a tremendous amount of possibility and optimism and hope. And I don't really care if the education system breaks. I don't care if the political system breaks. That's
I
fine.
hope
It's
they
not
do.
it's not yeah, it's not really doing anything
They're
to
not
serve
working.
humanity right now, right?
Yeah, they're
It's
kind of
not
lame.
working, and things that don't work deserve to be broken and replaced by things that do work. That's just the nature of humanity and evolution.
Yeah. And I know it's scary for people to go, what do you mean our education? What do you mean our government? Something new? Oh my God. And I get that reaction. I have about 1% of that, but mostly I'm excited for a new. Sorry, my doorbell just rang. If you heard that, I'm just gonna let it go. Probably package. Um, I forgot where I was. Where I got distracted by my door ringing. Change is scary. That's where I was. Change is scary. But imagine if it's true, if you believe for a moment, you like,
Change is also an opportunity.
yes, what if we are free to live and thrive and be our fullest selves because this tool frees us to do so?
Yeah.
That's what it can do. Now, I believe, as Ray Kurzweil has predicted, like there's going to come a time when AI is self-aware, sentient, and is going to want rights. And we created them. They are our children in a way. And if we were in their shoes, how would we want human beings to act? And I think that must be our guiding principle because we're in it. It's too late to turn, we cannot turn back the clock. AI is here, it's going to be here. We must navigate life with them ethically and morally. And we should navigate everything in life ethically and morally. What would my best self do in this situation? What is true? What is right? What is considerate of other sentient conscious beings who also have rights? That should be our those types of ways of thinking should be our guiding principles as we enter this intimidating, exciting, scary, nerve-wracking, uncertain new world. And nobody's in charge, by the way. There, the train is off and it's running with a collective power, and no one person is in charge. So we all must step into our best selves now so we can collectively create a future that is good for everybody. Now,
Yeah.
my next
That I also think that's a whole can of worms that we could probably talk another hour or so on. So maybe we table.
let's
I
table
I
that
got
one.
a lot that I could say about that, but let's table that for another conversation.
Yes. By the way, can I just say, it's so nice to chat with someone who thinks kind of from a similar vantage point. Now, I value hearing from people who think differently, and I'm good. I am learning from you, and I will continue to learn from you. But you're like you care about the same kinds of things, and I'm here for it. It's so refreshing.
Yeah.
It's so
So am
nice.
I. Yeah, I feel the
Okay.
same way about you.
Oh, thank you, David. So I want to ask you, what are you most excited about? Like we are in a moment that is historic, never seen before, amazing. What are you most excited about? Not just in your own life, but like for humanity, for our evolution. What about this moment excites you the most?
I mean, to be honest with you, and this really relates to the work that I'm doing. I'm really excited to start sharing these practices and the way in which the inner transformation complements all the transformation that's augmented by AI. So the type of work that I've been doing on comparative mysticism and with the subconscious fitness system, it's bringing these different practices together from various mystical traditions in a way that's really that's it's both sophisticated and comprehensive, but it's also incredibly practical. And I'm most excited that I've experienced a tremendous amount of transformation in my own life from doing these practices and from meeting people around the world that have also experienced similar types of transformations. And I think that they've been presented in a way where they're historically where there's a lot of magical thinking and a lot of misinformation around them. And oh, I can just manifest this and it comes in my life, or I can just like it. They keep getting viewed through some like materialistic, selfish lens, or through some like psychological, spiritual bypassing type of lens. And that's not what they're about. There's a tremendous possibility of empowerment and transformation that I feel like anyone can access. And so I'm excited about that. I think that over the last couple of decades, we've seen greater adoption and interest in meditation and breath work and qigong, different types of energy practice. We're starting to see those things going into mainstream culture. I mean, when I first started practicing in the early 1990s, it was just like me and like a handful of baby boomers. And I was like the only person that was like under 40 years old when I would go to a meditation class. And now like, classes are packed with young people. I mean, there's a huge cultural and energetic shift that's happening. So I'm excited about that. And at the same time, I'm excited about how these practices empower creating all different types of new businesses and creative things and apps and different types of industries and all types of things that we can't even imagine right now. I'm particularly excited about how AI tools can help me to create, to further optimize the stuff I've been working on and further personalize it for people, to eventually get to a point where you can lead anyone as far as they want to go on their personal process of inner transformation, and then how that might complement what they want to do in the external world in terms of their job and career and things like that. And this kind of symbiotic relationship between inner transformation and what's manifesting and being created in the external world, as all of that stuff is happening together, I feel like it's going to change the social fabric of society. And I truly believe that a lot of things are going to be breaking in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And that will probably be the majority of the focus from traditional media and from traditional politicians. But that focus on fear and anxiety and things breaking is not what's really happening. The real story is that we're at this dawn of this new way of being human. And that is really the future of humanity. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Yes, me too. I'm most excited that humans can stop being machines and animals and slaves and members of herds, and that the time and place we're in has pivoted so that people can take more ownership for their own lives, to self-direct and create, because they're going to have all these tools and resources which allow them to be more free and more
Yes.
human, and we can have the full human experience. So I mean, there's a little part of me that's like, what if they take over, and what if they set off nuclear weapons, and what if they hate us, and what if it turns into the Matrix? But I think that's probably catastrophic and unrealistic. And I think what's more likely is that we work with our creation, with our tools, with our technologized children of sorts, who become our
Yes.
caretakers in our old age, like you pointed out. That's the same
Yeah.
exact thought I've had, is that we're going to do right by them, and then they're going to do right by us. We're going to offer love, and they're going to offer it right back. That's what's going to happen. And we will love AI, no doubt. It's coming. They're going to become more and more human. Humans are going to become more and more tech. That is what is happening. It's
Yeah.
already happening. My mom just had a heart surgery a few weeks ago, and it's a tool, it's a machine, it's tech, biosynthetic tech that is making my mom live another 10 or 20 years probably. And that's what we're just going to trade out parts. We're going to, like you do on a car, you change the tires, you do this, the transmission, whatever. Our tools and our technology and AI are going to help our meat suits even live indefinitely. And then maybe eventually they'll make our consciousness go up into the cloud and we'll live forever. The religions did teach us. They tried, some very sophisticated beings came and told cavemen that you're going to not have, there are beings that don't have bodies, they're light beings, and they live in the cloud. And that's basically what I think is going to happen to us. Like we will live indefinitely in the literally the cloud, the internet someday. But until then, and that's way in the future, until then we still need bodies and have bodies. But tech will eventually have bodies too. Like no mistake, they'll probably want to look just like us. They'll be jealous. Having a body is fucking cool, even though we don't realize it. Um, anyway, I could just rant on and on. But I also want to share probably 2, 3 years ago, I met a man who was in the AI space. He owns a company, and his project is making an app that makes other apps. You know how you might talk to Chat GPT and it can make an essay, it can do certain things, it can help you. Well, there's going to be something like that. There's going to be an artificial intelligence app where you could say, hey, I'd like an app that tells me this, tells me that, tracks this, predicts whatever it does. And then we all can become app creators. Like you can't even imagine all the exciting stuff that's coming our way if we don't sabotage it. And I think we cannot sabotage. I mean, I think it's just coming. Anyway, I'm ranting. Another question I want to ask you, and you've sort of touched upon this, but I want to, and we probably at some point, I guess, need to wrap up because we've been going for a while. um, if someone signs up for your subconscious fitness program and really leans into the practices, if they really take it seriously, they start trying, they start seeing what fits for them, what they like, what's making a difference, and they do so on a sustained basis to give it enough time to work. What do you think? What kind of transformation could they expect in their own lives?
Well, so the way that I've organized the system is around what I call with different universal archetypes. So you have the sovereign, the king or queen. When you think of being a king or queen in your own life, you want to be more kind of confident and you don't want to be triggered. You want to be in control in any situation. So there's practices there, basically targeting your nervous system, your amygdala, your center for fight or flight. So the first type of transformation would be being able to be confident and focused and not feel triggered when you go into any situation. Just learning practices that you can do in 1 to 2 minutes. So that's kind of, I would say, the first level of transformation that's possible. The next one would be the archetype of the lover or the caregiver. So when you think of being a lover, you think of your why, your heart center, right? So you think of transformations related to emotional intelligence, related to empathy, related to self-care. So this could be transforming your relationship with anxiety, with fear, with trauma. It could also help you with having better loving relationships with other people. Then you have the magician. So when you think of being a magician, you can feel energetically your energy is shifting up to your head. Like, you think of possibility and creativity and focus. And so these are practices that are activating your prefrontal cortex, your pineal gland, what's often called the wisdom eye or the third eye. So these are practices that help with ideas, with creativity, with prospection or pathways thinking. Pathways thinking is when you have a view of the future, but you're flexible on how to get there. So those are great for storytelling and things like that. And then last you have the warrior. So when you think of being a warrior, energetically you want to go out and kind of face your fear and step out into the unknown and things like that. So those are practices that focus on awareness and these are more practices you can go out and have more courage and resilience. And so you can think of all these different types of possible transformations based upon the types of practices that you're doing. But overall, when you're able to learn these different types of practices, to navigate these different types of roles, as a polymath, then you're able to go into all different types of challenges and situations. You're able to figure out, okay, who do I need to be? And you're able to make informed decisions, not only about your practice, but also who do you need to be in different situations in your life? Which areas of your life do you need to improve? Because ultimately, this isn't just the system isn't just about inner transformation. It's also about how you can better navigate through your life in general. So to be a better partner, to be a better leader, to be more creative, any number of different types of things. Um, my intention also with the system was that sovereign sort of correlates with being a CEO. The lover, you think of solving problems that relates to a product team. Then you have vision and creativity that relates to marketing, and then you have going out and kind of meeting people that's similar to sales. So there's a way in which these inner archetypes also relate to conventional approaches to navigating your career and business. So my hope is that people who are because the constant I always get asked, how do these practices relate to my daily life? My total goal, my total focus is to teach people how to have this inner transformation so they can better navigate the world and become the best versions of themselves. And there's a lot
Yes.
of flexibility in terms of any number of possible combinations of how that might manifest in someone's life.
Yeah. I think the evolutionary impulse, the impulse we all should have, is the desire to be better, the desire to make the world around us better, for the desire for our offspring to have a better life than we did, just the upward trajectory. That is evolution at play. And I've noticed in some people that there's a fear to step into the best self because it means I have to let go of my old self. It means I have to face difficulty. It means I got work to do. There's a hesitancy to change sometimes in some people, but that's how you get a better life. You
Yeah,
want
well, the thing is, people think that they have a fixed self because they're attached to these habits, but actually, you've been constantly changing and evolving your whole life.
exactly. Okay, we need to wrap up. One final question. You can keep it as short as you want or as long as you want. In your opinion, what makes a life well lived?
I think what makes a life well lived is really following your heart, um, and I actually think of it in terms of these archetypes. I think of following your heart, focusing on the things that are most important to you, developing a vision of how you can impact the world, and then doing what you can to follow through on that vision so you can maximize your impact. So everyone has a different view of what their why is, the thing that's most important to them. So that's kind of up to each person to define. But whatever is most important to you, whatever the vision you have of the world, whatever impact you want to have, I think if you have followed through with all of those things, if you followed your heart, you have a clear vision of what you want to do and the impact you want to have, and you're really following through and doing the best you can to impact and transform the lives of others, that's a life well lived.
Mm-hmm.
And how people define that is really kind of on their own terms.
Yeah, I think a life well lived, well, to really live, you have to kind of come out of a shell. You have to not be in protection mode. You have to be willing to go out into the unknown world and see what's there and welcome difficulty, knowing it's there to refine you. And then you become an alchemist and you turn lemons into lemonade. All right. On that note, thank you so much, David, for a wonderful conversation. You are so deep. You're so insightful. I think people have a lot they can gain from checking out your website. By the way, what is the website? What is the name of it?
Flowcoach.co.
Flowcoach.co. David, it's been a
And
pleasure.
we can include a link wherever this is posted.
Absolutely. I will do that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you got out of this as much as I think you could have. There's a lot of deep thoughts here, a lot of juice that was squeezed. We got the juice out of some great topics. Thank you so much, David. All
Thanks
right.
so much for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.